While it is a basic tenet of scouting to develop a scout physically, mentally, and morally, by 1912, the Boy Scouts of America came to the conclusion that we needed to increase our influence in the areas of mental and moral development. The first step was the formation of a book review department within Boys' Life magazine. The second was the creation of the book department of the National Council, which was announced in the 1913 annual report.
In connection with the book review department in our magazine, under the direction of Mr. Franklin K. Mathiews, it developed that the Scout movement could greatly increase its usefulness by undertaking to furnish advice upon worthwhile books for boys. In our efforts to give value and moral worth to the activities of boys, we realize that it must be remembered that the boy is influenced not only by his outdoor life, but also in the disposition of his other leisure moments. Among the great mass of juvenile publications now available are many books which have negative influence. Quite often, these are most attractively bound, and they are not as readily detected as in the days when the dime novel was more prevalent. Realizing the large opportunity for real service in this direction, plans were developed for giving the boys expert advice as to meritorious books. Indeed, the plan goes further and involves the recommendation of special books which might be most likely to have a helpful influence in particular cases, detailed information of which is made available through a special questionnaire. In this connection, plans have been made whereby it is hoped that the expense of this department will be covered through the sale of the books recommended. Any book now listed in our handbook or included in the special list which is being prepared can be purchased through the national headquarters. Recently, it is developed that the Scout movement has an opportunity of actual influence in the production of reading matter for boys. Publishers are inviting our suggestions as to the character of books that might be published with benefit to the average boy, and yet with profit to the publisher. Some of the publishers have indicated a willingness to place upon the market high-grade books at moderate prices in order to compete with some of the harmful literature that is now obtaining a large circulation. By capitalizing the interest of the boy in the Scout movement, this is particularly true of one series of books which has had an enormous sale, but which is of very doubtful value to the boy, and which does not correctly interpret the real aims and hopes of the Scout movement.
One of the goals of Matthew through the book department was to identify books and authors that could be assembled into what became known as the Every Boy's Library. The series began in 1913 with 25 titles. In 1914, 5 additional titles were added, including Along the Mohawk Trail by Percy Fitzhugh. We'll learn more about Percy Fitzhugh and how he went from a little-known juvenile fiction author to quite possibly the most prolific scouting adventure novelist in the history of Scouting America in this edition of Artifact of the Week. Percy Fitzhugh was born on September 7, 1876 in Brooklyn, New York, to William, a bookkeeper, and Emma Fitzhugh, a homemaker. While not much is known about his childhood, we do know that he had an older sister and brother and a younger sister and brother. From 1892 to 1894, Percy attended Pratt Institute, located just 2 miles from his family's home. The Pratt Institute was the dream of philanthropist and millionaire Charles Pratt, and the school was envisioned to be a place where the average person could go and learn a trade. While Fitzhugh studied regular art, there's no record that he graduated from the institute. While in attendance at the Pratt Institute, Fitzhugh began to write. Fitzhugh married Harriet Lloyd Laporte, a Massachusetts native and a graduate of a Boston Business School, on July 13, 1899. Harriet was working in New York when she met Fitzhugh. Their marriage certificate records Percy's occupation as news business. Immediately after their marriage, the Fitzhughs moved to Kingston, Massachusetts. In 1901, Harriet gave birth to their first child, Lawrence Stetson, and in 1902, the Fitzhughs returned to Brooklyn and their second child, Millicent Alden, was born. The earliest known book written by Fitzhugh is the Goldenrod Storybook, published by McLaughlin Brothers in 1906. In 1907, Fitzhugh authored a series of books about the American Revolution, including The Story of a Fight from Concord Bridge to a Field at Yorktown. This was the first time Percy used his pseudonym, Hugh Lloyd, which is derived from the last part of his last name combined with his wife's middle name. In 1908, the Fitzhughs again left New York and moved to Hackensack, New Jersey, a small town of about 12,000 people. Hackensack would become the model for the fictional town of Bridgeboro, where most of Fitzhugh's scouting stories would be set. His first scout book, Along the Mohawk Trail, one of 3 books he authored for the Kroll Scout Book series. Another book in the series was For Uncle Sam Boss, or Boy Scouts in Panama. This book was published in 1913 and was inspired by 2 visits that Fitzhugh took to Panama. The second visit also led to his first article for Boy's Life, For the Honor of Uncle Sam, published in the April 1915 edition. In these books, we can see the beginnings of the characters that will form the basis for what are arguably his most successful books yet to come. Franklin K. Mathiews, a Baptist minister, was hired in 1912 by the Boy Scouts to head up the new book department of the National Council as the self-titled consulting book physician. Soon after his hiring, Mathiews' title was changed to Chief Librarian of the BSA. In this role, one of Mathiews' accomplishments was the assembly of the Every Boy's Library in 1913. Initially, the library contained 25 titles. In 1914, the library was expanded by 5 new books, one of which was Fitzhugh's Along the Mohawk Trail. In this book, Mathiews saw what he considered the proper depiction of the Boy Scouts and their mission. Mathiews found it quite obvious that Fitzhugh had done his homework prior to putting pen to paper, and with the exception of a totally implausible glider incident at the end of the book, the adventurous story gives a fairly accurate picture of the Boy Scout program, its aims, and ideals. This leads Mathiews to invite the established journalist and author of children's literature to write a series of fictional scout books, the first being based on the 1915 re-release of Adventures of a Boy Scout. Fitzhugh accepts the assignment and pens Tom Slade, Boy Scout of the Motion Pictures. In 1941, Fitzhugh wrote a letter to a young fan where he says, "I did not follow the movie script very closely, and there was indeed no resemblance between the story and the screen version." The book is a huge success and marks the first of 19 Tom Slade books he will author over the next 15 years. The Tom Slade series of books is the story of the redemptive power of scouting. Tom begins in his first book as a tough, wayward newsboy with a reputation for mischief. Through the guidance of his scoutmaster, Tom joins the troop and slowly transforms. The story emphasizes discipline and character growth. In Tom Slade at Temple Camp, published in 1917, Temple Camp, which is Fitzhugh's fictional summer camp, becomes the central stage for growth and camaraderie. Tom's adventures here show how he's learning teamwork, leadership, and a respect for nature. In 1918's Tom Slade, Motorcycle Dispatch Bearer, published during the First World War, Tom enlists as a dispatch rider carrying messages under fire. It reflected the patriotism of the era and portrayed scouts as capable of real-world heroism. Tom Slade with the Colors, written in 1919, is after Tom returns from the war in Europe. His struggles with duty, sacrifice, and adjusting after wartime echo the real-life experiences of many veterans and their families. Later titles like Tom Slade on the River, Tom Slade in the Northwoods, and Tom Slade Forest Ranger explore his adventures in the outdoors, moving Tom toward adulthood while keeping him grounded in his scouting ideals. Tom Slade's journey was more than entertainment. It was a story of how even the roughest boy could become a man of character through scouting. The Tom Slade series ran until 1930. The Roy Blakely series includes 18 books and ran from 1920 through 1931. The character of Roy was introduced as comic relief in the Tom Slade books, but soon became the star of his own series. Roy is a wisecracking, fun-loving kid who takes life as it comes and sees humor in every situation. The first novel, released in 1918, sets the tone. Roy is witty, mischievous, and constantly joking. He leads the Silver Fox Patrol, whose antics often test the patience of their leaders, but always circle back to scouting's values. In 1920's Roy Blakely Camp on the Wheels, the Silver Foxes outfit a moving camp on an old truck. The story is filled with slapstick humor and misadventures, but also highlights teamwork and resourcefulness. Roy Blakely's Silver Fox Patrol, published in 1921, focuses on the bonds of friendship in scouting, with the troop rallying together to solve problems despite their comical distractions. In Roy Blakely's Adventures in Camp, written in 1922, the story explores the mix of serious scoutcraft and lighthearted chaos. Roy's voice, with its constant wisecracks, sets these books apart. Unlike the heavier themes of Tom Slade, Roy Blakely was Fitzhugh's comedic release, showing that scouting wasn't all duty and discipline. Sometimes it was about the joy, the jokes, and the bonds of brotherhood. Roy's books offered laughter and fun, appealing to boys who wanted to see scouts as adventurers and pranksters. Westy Martin, known to all as a friend of Roy Blakely, appears as the hero of adventures quite different from those in which we have seen him as a scout of Bridgeboro Troop 1 and at Temple Camp. Westy has excellent knowledge of scoutcraft and outdoor lore. In every book, he uses this expertise together with his undaunted courage to save lives and right wrongs. Westy's stories revolve around the theme of man against nature. In each adventure, Westy is presented with the chance to go out west. Inevitably, he finds himself stranded, lost, or somehow stuck in a precarious situation in the wilderness. But he always keeps a cool head and relies on his scout training to see him and his friends through. Each of these books takes the hero into a different region of the country. Despite the fact that Fitzhugh did little traveling himself and never visited much of the West, the setting of each story is wonderfully accurate in its depiction of the surrounding landscape that Westy is visiting. The series, which included 8 titles and was last published in 1931, stressed responsibility, respect for nature, and personal honor. In 1933, a special 4-in-1 book was released, Out West with Westy Martin, which combined the first 4 titles of the series into one volume. The Pee Wee Harris series began in 1922 and ran through 1930, over a total of 13 books. Pee Wee Harris began as a side character in Roy Blakely's books, serving as Troop 1's mascot and as the primary target for Roy Blakely's jollying. Pee Wee is always found to be excruciatingly adorable by nearly every girl he meets, of course except his sister. Pee Wee quickly becomes a fan favorite, and Fitzhugh officially introduces us to Pee Wee Harris in his 1922 self-titled book. Young Pee Wee is the son of Dr. Harris, M.D., and is a scout who is a small in stature but a giant when it comes to scouting. Fitzhugh points out that Pee Wee is not in the Boy Scouts, but rather the Boy Scouts are in him. Little Pee Wee has a big appetite and is rarely seen out of the reach of food, and usually gets himself into predicaments through his enthusiasm for the scout way and his noble intentions. However, Pee Wee is the kind of boy who always lands on his feet. He takes a situation that he manages to screw up with his zeal, and with a huge dose of luck, always seems to come out on top. Even when he loses, he wins. Pee Wee resonated with young readers who saw themselves in his mix of overconfidence and personality. He was the symbol of the unstoppable scout spirit, small in size but giant in heart. Unlike the other Fitzhugh characters, Pee Wee lives on even today as a cartoon in the pages of Scout Life magazine. Fitzhugh was a self-proclaimed terrible speller, and coupled with the increased workload of publishing these 4 series almost concurrently, he employed a typist to assist him in taking dictation, preparing manuscripts, and of course, spelling and punctuation. Part of what made Fitzhugh's work so popular is that the background of one of the books, you would get a glimpse of what might be happening in another book from another series. Fitzhugh used this to draw you into the world of Bridgeboro and fictional Troop 1. The Bridgeboro Fitzhugh created for his books, with locations like the bank, the train station, Bennett's Fresh Confectionery, Terrace Avenue, Barrel Alley, well, these were all based on real-world locations in Hackensack. Just as Fitzhugh's places of fiction were based on real locales, so were many of the characters in his books. Tom Slade was based on a real person, but his name is unknown. Now, Fitzhugh provided some clues to his identity in the dedication of 2 of his books. The dedication of Tom Slade with the boys over there reads, "To F.A.O., the real Tom Slade, whose extraordinary adventures on land and sea put these storied exploits in the shade, this book is dedicated with envious admiration." Tom Slade with the Flying Corps has this cryptic dedication, "To the TSOTZ." Fitzhugh's wife, Harriet, confirmed that Tom was based on a real person. In a 1967 letter, she said that the person was still living in the Hackensack area, but she could not recall his name. The inspiration for Pee Wee Harris was a boy named Alfred G. Bloom. Now, Alfred's father ran a newsstand just down the street, and Alfred would often pester Fitzhugh for information about the next Tom Slade story. Eventually, Fitzhugh let Alfred read the manuscripts before they were published. Alfred also posed for the cover of the first Pee Wee novel in November of 1921. As the popularity of the books grew, Fitzhugh began to receive fan mail. It got to the point that individual characters were also receiving fan mail, despite the fact that they were fictional people. Eventually, the amount of fan mail and requests for autographs became too much, and Fitzhugh resorted to sending this card to those requesting an autograph. Enrollment in the Boy Scouts also rose with the popularity of Fitzhugh's books. In 1915, there were approximately 182,000 registered Scouts. By 1925, membership had grown to 756,000. Many of these Scouts likely joined because of Fitzhugh's stories, and there's no doubt that the sale of Fitzhugh's books were supported by the many Scouts eager to read anything related to the Scouting movement. It is believed that more than 1 million copies of the 58 books in the 4 series were sold. Despite this success Fitzhugh was experiencing, in 1918 the family suffered a tragic loss when their 16-year-old daughter died of influenza on December 1st. Also, the success of Fitzhugh's novels did not translate into monetary wealth. Fitzhugh received an advance of $300 per manuscript, plus a royalty of 1 or 2 cents for each book sold, with the advance being deducted from the royalty payments. To put that into context, he received between $1,000 to $2,000 per year. In today's dollars, that would be somewhere between $18,000 to $36,000 annually. Not the millions an author might earn today when combined with marketing tie-ins and movie and TV options. In 1927, the Fitzhughs moved from Hackensack to Oradell, New Jersey, and into the only home they ever owned. As the popularity of his scouting books began to fall off and the Great Depression gripped the world, Fitzhugh's financial picture turned bad. Fitzhugh continued to write, working on 3 new series of detective genre books, but these did not excite Fitzhugh, and he published them under his pen name of Hugh Lloyd. The stories were cold and dark. As the series progressed, the stories became even colder, even darker, and there is a fair amount of death and violence included. Unfortunately, the first 2 series of the books did not sell well, and the 3rd series was canceled. About the same time, Fitzhugh was afflicted with a chronic heart condition and began to take codeine to regulate his heart rate. This caused him to slow down and curtailed much of his activities. He also started to use a cane for stability when walking. In 1935, Fitzhugh and his wife worked together on a concise biographical dictionary of famous men and women. He also started to write a book for adults titled The Walrus in the Barber Shop. The book was never finished or published. With his health deteriorating and his writing coming to an end, his financial situation got even worse. So bad that he eventually borrowed money from his younger brother, and his brother refinanced the loan on their home and reduced his mortgage to $50 per month. Harriet ended up getting a job as a typist for the telephone company to help support the family. In the mid-1940s, a glimmer of financial hope appeared as a new television production company from New York wanted to create a TV series about Pee Wee Harris. After a few weeks of negotiations, an agreement was reached on the television rights and compensation, and then the project died, with the production company deciding to pursue other opportunities. Over time, the constant use of codeine left Fitzhugh unable to walk or use his hands, and he suffered from this condition until his death on July 5, 1950. Fitzhugh was buried alongside his daughter in the Hackensack Cemetery. Fitzhugh's legacy, like many others from the early 1900s, is not without controversy. While he is viewed as very patriotic, a believer in American exceptionalism, and loyal to the government, he's also seen as having a current of insensitivity towards race and gender in some of his writings. Most notable is the 1919 pictorial history book, From Appomattox to Germany. This book uses more than 200 illustrations and stories, the history of the United States from the Civil War to World War I, with each chapter providing a colorful story about a significant event or events in our nation's history. Of unsettling note are statements throughout the book that can be viewed as racist or bigoted, even when being measured by 1919 standards. While it is possible that this is who Fitzhugh was, it's also true that this book could just reflect post-World War I American society. Fitzhugh was one of, if not the most popular children's author of his time. And despite his flaws, the majority of his work was upbeat, full of positive messages and themes, and had a positive impact not only on the Boy Scouts of America, but also on helping set the tone and improving the quality of much of the youth literature of his day. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Join us next time as we continue to learn more about the history of Scouting America through the collection of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.